It's time for a new evolution in raising golfers, one that doesn't involve headaches, tears, or heading down the path of unknown. Whether you're trying to introduce children to the game of golf, help them play competitively, or play at a collegiate level, you're in the right place. This show is for any parent, player, or coach who wants to build a better team at home and on the golf course. This is the Raising Golfers Podcast. Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm your host, Travis Hauser, PGA professional, working in beautiful Carlsbad, California, at a golf club called Rancho Carlsbad. It's an 18-hole par 3 course with a full-size driving range, great for everyone, especially families trying to get everybody involved in the game of golf. If you haven't already, check out the podcast's Instagram or Facebook pages. Plus, on raisinggolfers.com, I've shared the wisdom from every guest on every podcast that pretty much sums up the main messages that the guests are trying to share. It's really awesome. Go check it out. In my opinion, sports teach us so many valuable life lessons, and to bring that even more to life, our guest, Dr. Beth Brown, who has a Ph.D. in sports psychology, is going to help us better understand those lessons.
If we want them to have the best chance, perhaps to excel at a high level, then we need to promote fun, friends, and improvement. And those life lessons, I think, then are part of that. If we want them to not get burned out, not get injured, then again, we want to promote those other things, I think, over winning, right? And I think if we want them to just continue in the game for a lifetime, like you said, create experiences where maybe they don't go on and play at high level, but they come back to it as adults, then again, we want to create an environment where they don't just have the opportunity to become better golfers, but they become better people.
Her youth sport participation paved the way for her collegiate success as a member of the University of Oklahoma basketball and conference champion women's golf teams. As her love for sports continued, she realized the unique opportunity sport has to impact not only physical abilities, but life skill development as well. This led Beth to earn her Ph.D. in sports psychology at the University of Kansas. Since then, she's gone on to influence and impact thousands through her roles as a golf coach, an educational program developer at the First Tee, and LPGA-USGA girls golf. She's also the founder and owner of the consulting agency Team Aureus. Dr. Beth, I'm so excited to have you join us here today on the Raising Golfers podcast. So welcome.
Thanks, Travis. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm really fortunate to be able to talk to you because some of the things that we're going to talk about today are things I think that's going to help me as a coach, as a parent, but also all the listeners around the world. And one of the things that you preach is learning life lessons through sports. And I couldn't agree more with that line. So I'm kind of curious though, like you've got a strong background in golf specifically, but how did you fall into your PhD of sports psychology?
Yeah, that's a great question, Travis. Yeah, actually, I did kind of fall into it, so that's a good phrase. I went to University of Pacific where I got my master's, and of course, I'd played college basketball and college golf at University of Oklahoma. And when I went there, I was actually starting off in sports management, but I met a gentleman after the first semester. His name is Dr. Glenn Albaugh, and he's in the Northern California area and has worked with many golfers over the years. And so I was actually assigned. I was assisting the sports management professor, and I was assisting him. And just being around him really brought to light my interest in the kind of mental and emotional aspects of golf, and it made me start thinking about how in basketball. I mean, I was like in high school, I would look in the mirror before the game and say, "You're Beth Brown and no one can stop you." Right. So I had that mentality. And then in golf, I was always questioning myself, seeming to lack confidence. And so being around Dr. Albaugh got me really thinking about my experiences and got me excited about potentially not only figuring my own self out, but helping others. And so I made a request and got switched over to become his full-time graduate assistant my second year at University of Pacific. And kind of the rest was history.
That's cool. Now, I'm going to ask you an interesting question here is are there things that you know now that you wish you would have known when you were a competitive golfer?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think the biggest thing in the simplest terms, because I think most of the people listening are probably parents and folks working on their game, it's just this idea of, what do you like when you play your best? And how do you prepare when you play your best? All those things. You just had Lynn and Pia on recently with Vision 54, and they talk about, it'd be like Beth 54, like knowing my best self. And I didn't know that. In basketball, I just did it. And in golf, I just didn't. But if I had known what I was doing in basketball, been intentional, and had somebody help teach me to take those things I did automatically, if you will, through basketball and apply them to my golf, to, how do I talk to myself when I'm at my best? How do I walk when I'm at my best? How do I prepare? How do I get myself back on track when I get off? And knowing those things, increasing that self-awareness, and then developing skills to get there more consistently. Those are the things that I wish I had known. So I feel like I had a lot of people help me along the way. So I probably did pretty well considering how little I knew at the time.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because one of the big things I've been preaching recently with my adult students and junior golfers is just that self-awareness. And that's something that I've taken away from Lynn and Pia. And I think it's really resonated well with a lot of students, because you'd be surprised how little self-awareness we have as golfers, especially in the moment. And then the moment would be on the golf course, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's really important what you said there. I think it's really interesting. I find it interesting that you said you kind of had that self-awareness with basketball, but you didn't so much in golf. And I'm curious why it doesn't transfer between two different sports.
Right, right. And I don't know if it was so much self-awareness, Travis, as that I just did it automatically. And I was actually thinking about this a little bit. I think because I grew up, like, literally from the age of 2, being around basketball, like, being at midcourt, watching my dad's teams practice, dribbling the ball with 2 hands, and was just always always playing basketball, and always kind of playing up with mostly boys. My dad was coaching boys at the time, boys older than me. And so I think that I did a lot of things to develop confidence that I didn't really know how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think I had that self-awareness. I think that in hindsight, I said automatically, but I think I did things. I was prepared. I practiced. I developed fundamentals. I was always comparing myself to myself. So I developed confidence in basketball, but didn't know how I did it. And so without that awareness and then intentionality to transfer it to golf, I mean, sometimes I was able to. It just wasn't consistent. It just kind of happened by chance, if you will, because I wasn't really sure how to do it.
Hmm.
And so I think that intentionality is the element there, not only to be self-aware of how we are when we're at our best, or how we are when we're confident, but then that self-regulation, to be able to compare yourself to yourself. Am I getting more confident? Like, I'm not comparing myself to Travis, right? And then that idea of, how do I develop the skill, right? So how do I regulate it? How do I get better at it? And that sort of thing. So
Right. Well, it's interesting that you say all this. And one point that I need to bring up for the listeners is that you played golf at an extremely high level, and you played at a very good university for golf as well. But like you said, looking back on it, I think you realized there were some of these things that were missing and that could have really improved your game. And I think that's maybe why you went even deeper into some of your studies with what you've done in your profession as well. Is that right?
yes, absolutely. I was in a lot of classes with folks who were actually majoring in counseling or clinical psych. The counseling was my minor, so I'd have a few classes with them, and they always joke that the people who went into counseling and stuff were like trying to figure themselves out, which is a good thing, right? And same thing I think with the sports psychology is I ended up going that direction. That, again, my good fortune to get to be around Dr. Glenn Albaugh, and he was a big influence on me in that area. At the same time, I think it's like, oh, this is a chance to figure out myself and why that I don't consistently perform at my best, in different things that I'm doing, from basketball to golf to just, performing as a professional, as I was growing into my profession, being in graduate school.
How is sports psychology applied to young children in sports? This is one thing I'm very curious about. And I think the more tactics you could share here with even very young learners up through, let's just say, pre-high school would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, because I think you got to start with general understanding of what sports psychology is and the misconception of it that, a lot of people that I talk to, they get the idea that, you go to work with someone in sports psychology if something's wrong, or if the kid's broken, if they're having anxiety, or they're not performing well, or they're flustered, they want to quit the sport. And so it's kind of this reactive approach versus looking at it, really looking at sports psychology as part of the holistic child, right? So it's the mental and emotional health of the young person, just like adults. We're more than just our physical performance. And so sports psychology for kids as well as adults is really about, creating a healthy experience. I think the difference with kids is that, ideally you're helping with the parents as well, because they're the ones that are around them the most, right? And so kind of educating the whole family. And then I think breaking things down where it's just like you would do with the physical part of the golf game, like, not imposing our adult terminology, our adult mentalities onto the kids. So for example, with young kids, a couple of, the fun basic things, to be able to start with, with that, I mean, it could be, like even, a 10-year-old, right, is this idea of effort, right? And then they hear the word focus a lot. Well, what is that? So kind of these ideas of effort, giving your best, and then focus, paying attention to what you need to. So if you're in the outfield and you're on a baseball team, like, hey, you need to be watching the ball coming off the batter's bat, right? So what am I focusing on? And so getting kids, at early ages like that to start after a performance, rating their effort, rating their performance, whether it's on a numerical scale or a 5-star scale, whatever it is, smiley faces, right? And so getting them to rate some simple things, and then those things really then help kind of set that foundation for that self comparison. So how am I doing with my effort? We might not have won the game, or I might not have won the race, or I might not have won the tournament, but how am I doing? Am I getting better, right? And so I have control over that. And I think those things, getting kids to start to focus on a couple of simple things they can understand, I think, definitely starting with effort, then that's really a great foundation for helping them start to build confidence. So in golf, we call it personal par, right? My par, me versus me. And so you can call it whatever you want with other sports, but it's the idea of how am I doing and how am I improving?
I like that. So we had a mental coach come on the podcast. His name's Josh Nichols, and one of the things he left us with was something he calls the 3-in-1. So like at the end of a session, write down first 3 things that you do really well, and then 1 thing you need to work on. But what I think I would incorporate with what you just said for younger learners would be kind of like almost help guide them in some of those 3 positive things, or maybe in that, like you said, effort would be at kind of the forefront, and maybe some other things, whether it's focus, but kind of guide them. And like you said, whether it's just happy faces or sad faces or just a neutral face or whatever it may be, but that's a good way to kind of introduce them and kind of tie in also what I liked about that 3-in-1 as well. Because personally, I mean, I don't know if children fall in the same category, but I think as adults, we tend to, with our golf, think really negative very quickly as opposed to what we actually did well. And I think flipping it to the positive as soon as possible, like you said, will kind of help build confidence. So I like that. I like those ideas that you just shared. Those are cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and we definitely want to reinforce those positives because, that's how we're going to store them away in our memory to be able to draw back on them, right? And so recall them when we are working, to build confidence. So I would add fun to that, by the way, too. You made me think. I was thinking, this idea, because why do kids play? Fun, friends, and self-improvement. So if folks were looking for 3 things to rate or get kids to focus on, it would be, what was the most fun, or what did they enjoy the most? And, how was their effort? And, what did they focus on? How did they do with that? So those, I think, are 3 really simple areas to help parents or coaches who are working with, young kids in that kind of, 7 to 11 or 7 to 10-year-old range.
I love fun, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So what's
All
the
right.
best way to, what's the best way to inspire families and children to have fun together in golf?
Yeah, well, I think just thinking back even to what my dad did with me as a kid, this idea of the families that need to get together and go out and do it together and have fun, right? So the adults or the aunt like me or the parents are the role models for that. So I think really getting together and doing it with your kids. And then I think, if you're talking little bitty kids, I have a lot of friends who they're like, Beth, I've got my little kid, they're older now, but so their nieces and nephews, or even some of them their grandkids, they want to get them out to the golf course. And so it's this idea of, again, reframing what is fun from a kid's level. So if you've got like a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, getting them out to the golf course, like trying to get them to do golf like you probably isn't going to be fun for them, right? And so whether it's if helping you drive the golf cart legally, right, and or taking a putter out, or when we go out with my nephews, we would take like a putter in one club, and then they would take their little fishing net things, and they would take their little plastic things, so they wanted to catch turtles and do all that. So again, this idea of what is fun for them, and as the adults in their life, you'll know best what that is at each time if you really stop and go, okay, if I want them to have fun and inspire them to play with me as they get older, then I need to start off and have a childlike mentality of what fun is for them. And that the best thing would be is like, hey, what would be fun? Like, hey, let's go to the golf course. What do you want to do out there today? And like I said, my nephews, we took fishing nets and we took all kinds of stuff, and finding those times depending on where you golf at, where you're not going to be in the way or hold up play and that sort of thing. So I think, helping them, those ways when they're really little. But I think when they get a little bigger in terms, of inspiring them, it's this idea of, if you want them to do golf, then go ahead and expose them to lots of things, that variety, let them explore a lot of different things, and give them opportunities. I'm sure you've heard the term free play. If it is whatever the sport is, and if we come back to golf, if they go out with you and they're getting a little bit older and they're out on the course actually playing with you, let them help you set up the rules for that day. They don't have to be the rules of the USGA, right? And so, playing from a lot shorter courses, like we have, shorter tees, family tees. If you don't have them, make them up. Start off close to the green, and letting them really establish the rules. Maybe they want to swing like Happy Gilmore, for those people who remember that. And hey, every time I tee off, I'm going to swing like Happy Gilmore. So kind of having more of a free play mentality, even if they are getting a little bit older and starting to go out on the golf course with you for a couple of holes. I think that can really inspire them, and help them have fun. And then the last thing is they start to get maybe a little bit better or have some interest in improving. I think this idea of challenging them, kind of like the video games, one level up, one level beyond where they are. And so if that's, hey, let's play from a little bit farther back, or hey, let's add a new club to the bag, or a different club that maybe they haven't hit before. So anything you can do to challenge them, or maybe if it's, if they're playing 3 holes with you and maybe they had I'm just making this up, maybe they had a 27 the last time you played. And so, okay, well, what do we want to do today? What can we do to get a little bit better? And so maybe they set a goal to, my goal is to get 25 today, and I'm going to give my best effort on all 3 holes, right? So there's a little bit of variety there, I think, depending on if you're talking littles who are just wanting to get out to the golf course with you, all the way up to if they're starting to show some interest and are wanting to get better. So challenging them kind of like a video game, one level beyond where they are.
Yeah, I loved everything you just said there. It's really, really useful information. And I think to kind of sum up some of that stuff that you said, what I was thinking the whole time was experiences, like creating an experience around golf. So it's not just about playing golf by the rules every time you go out. It's about going out and having fun on the golf course and making that experience an enjoyable one where the children walk away and think, that was fun. And golf is now fun because I can also hit a ball, I can walk around, I can look at nature, I can catch some tadpoles or frogs, whatever it may be. But it's creating this experience and this positive experience that then resonates. And then over time, it's just this positive thing that children are going to look back and say, I want to play golf. Golf is fun because of these things. And it's like Nicole Weller, she said on her episode, she's like, imagine what a classroom looks like for kindergarten age. She's like, now, why would a golf lesson be for kindergartners at a college level? And like, I imagine like, at a college level course, right, you've got your lectures and like that learning environment's completely different than in a kindergarten classroom. So she was like, so your golf lessons need to be like a kindergarten classroom for kindergarten students. And so like all those things that you just said kind of connected with some of these things that other guests have come on the podcast and said. And then the other thing was, you said you don't have to play by the rules of golf. You just need to play golf. Hit the ball from A to B. You don't need to keep score. You can play by your own rules. You can make your own rules up. Again, it all ties into those experiences. And that's something I got actually from another guest, Neil Plimmer. And he says you just have a mix of playing the game of golf, which is by the rules that adults have created, and then play golf, which is just get the ball from A to B, however you want to do it, and have fun doing it. Right. And I think that balance, that mixture of what you were saying is really important. So that was really cool to hear from you.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea of creating experiences. I think you really did capture the essence of it, Travis.
Yeah, and everything you were saying there, I'm just thinking experiences, and all of those sound so positive. And I think that's what children are going to walk away with. We talked at the beginning about learning life lessons through sports. What would be some life lessons we may learn, or junior golfers may learn through golf?
Well, there's obviously a lot. I know for myself, the biggest things that I learned as a kid was this idea of personal responsibility, which is different. I was big into basketball and golf. And so the difference there is basketball, there's other people involved. But with golf, it was all about me, what I did, where I hit it. So this idea of personal responsibility, every once in a while you get a bad break or bad bounce. But at the end of the day, it's really, you are responsible for the decisions you make, and you're responsible for ultimately where the ball ended up. Right. And so I think golf is a great game for that. And also that for kids, we call it self-management, but in the business world, you hear the phrase emotional IQ, right? So then part of that is managing my emotions, because sometimes things do happen that I don't have control over, right? Whether it's the weather or the greens and whatever it may be, the pace of play, they're just things we can't control. And so this idea of how do I manage my emotions so that I can play my best more often. So I think golf is a great thing for that. But again, from personal experience, we could give lots of examples, and then even research would tell us it's got to be intentional. A lot of people like to say golf just teaches these things, and it doesn't, because again, I don't know, probably no one listening on your show, Travis, because they probably wouldn't do this or they wouldn't be listening, but people they know, right? They act not like their best selves when they're playing golf, when they hit a bad shot or whatnot. So it clearly doesn't automatically do it, right? But it does
Sure.
give, I think, one of the best environments for us as adults to intentionally create that bridge to life or bridge to other areas. And so I know when I worked at the First Tee, we called it Bridge to Life. I was a national educator for about 15 years with the First Tee, and that
Wow.
was the specific part of the lesson, was this idea of bridge to life. And we didn't call it that to the kids, but the coaches knew that, hey, asking them, okay, so you learned about managing your emotions today as it relates to golf, like how you're responding, to your outcomes. And so how might you use that when you go home with your family, or how are you going to use that when you go to the school? If you get upset, if something happens with a teacher or with a friend at school that you don't like, how are you going to apply what you've learned here to those areas? And so we have to be intentional, or it might happen. And if we want to wait on that, that's fine. But I think most people listening on your show here are wanting to kind of shorten the learning curve, right? And so we need to be intentional on asking kids those questions and drawing it out of them, whatever it is that we want them to learn, if it's emotional management or if it's taking responsibility. And a lot of times those opportunities happen maybe when they didn't play their best or didn't shoot their best, or they got beat. Those are the times we can really help draw out those, coachable moments or teachable moments, or what a lot of people would call those.
Do you think that inspiration for children growing in the game of golf, do you think that more importantly than winning, or more important than having a goal of going to play college golf, should be kind of learning these life lessons through the sports or through the game of playing golf?
Well, I think that we have to ask ourselves, what are our goals for our kids? And I can't answer that for other people. Of course, I'm going to say that the life lessons are more important, because we know the small
Right.
percentages that go play at those high levels. But I
Right.
think that, one of the cool things is that we know, and there's all kinds of different research out there, and we could give some, again, personal examples. This idea, if we really want to inspire the young people in our life to continue with golf for a lifetime, then if we can do the things that keep them in the game, which are, again, fun, friends, and getting better, right? And I would say, now this is Beth saying it, but in that order, right? Because if we can do those things, then we know, like, what was it? There's some research that says 70% of Olympic athletes in recent years played multiple sports into high school, right?
Mm.
So they're not playing just golf or just one thing, right? And so if we want them to have the best chance, perhaps to excel at a high level, then we need to promote fun, friends, and improvement. And those life lessons, I think, then are part of that. If we want them to not get burned out and not get injured, then again, we want to promote those other things, I think, over winning, right? And I think if we want them to just continue in the game for a lifetime, like you said, create experiences where maybe they don't go on and play at high level, but they come back to it as adults, then again, we want to create an environment where they don't just have the opportunity to become better golfers, but they become better people.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's really, it's really nice to hear that coming from you, Dr. Beth. And I think it's an important thing for all of the listeners to hear as well, because I've talked about this before. As adults, we kind of have values. We have our own values for our families. And let's just say specifically for golf, we probably have some values that we want for our children to get out of the game of golf. But a lot of times we start doing some silly things as adults, even as, coaches and parents. And, our reactions and what we do and say sometimes a little bit different than what actually our true values are. So I always recommend to listeners just kind of go back and reflect on those values, because it's easy to get caught up in a situation and you start saying things, or your body language is just completely different what those values are. And I myself, I have to put myself in a reality check as well. And I think it's just an important thing to have listeners here to make sure that you're constantly doing that, because any situation could change, and we don't want you to, and I don't want myself specifically to act differently or say different things what my true values are for my children or for my students. So that's advice I constantly talk about on the podcast to give. And I think those things that you mentioned there would be some very important things to put at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, every adult that I've ever met, wants the best for their kids. So I think that's just great advice, and hearing that, that's why you're hosting this podcast, to get that message out there.
Yes, thank you. So you've got some great resources, Dr. Beth, and you've got a couple of characters that you've created, Divot and Swish. Now, where did this idea come from?
Oh, right. Well, you probably have a picture there, but Divot, you can see, is a golf ball with, she has a grass court, so she's a divot.
That's
And
cool.
Swish is the basketball net. And so for those that are basketball players, we know nothing but net makes the sound of swish.
Yep.
And when you hit that, for the most part, when you're hitting a shot off the fairway, and you catch it crisply, ball first, you take a little divot. So to me, divot and swish are both the outcome of good shots in golf and basketball. And the inspiration, obviously, I grew up, playing basketball with my dad, a basketball coach, and leading into starting golf around the age of 8. And so I've just always had golf and basketball as part of my life, all the way up into college, playing golf at University of Oklahoma, but sitting on the bench in basketball, but just have had really, for the most part, great experiences through sport. And so I've had this idea in my head for, 15 plus years of using what I've learned to help families and coaches, anybody working with kids, and help the kids themselves. And so finally, through some external prompting, I finally pulled the first book together over the last year and a half. And Adventures with Divot and Swish in Costa Rica, The Superpower Courage, is the first in what's intended to be a children's book series, with the mission of really inspiring families and kids to not only have fun, but to become more active and learn life lessons through sports. So in this book, Divot and Swish, they travel to Costa Rica. It was actually my experience surfing, my one surfing lesson in Costa Rica. And they learn what I call the superpower of courage. But, the superpowers, you could think of it as sports psychology for kids. And so obviously we need courage in our lives outside of, not only in sport, but outside of sport, to try new things, to try something, even if we perceive it to be hard. And so that's kind of the story behind starting Adventures with Divot and Swish.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. And I think that ties in really well with something that we don't think about a lot. And I'm not sure if this falls under sports psychology or the emotional part or the mental part, but I think, let's just say your goal was to have your child play golf at a higher level, whether it was college golf or even professionally. We don't think about that. Besides golf, you have to have the courage to even hop on a plane and go to a new country or a new state and play at a new golf course with different types of grass, different types of weather, and different time zones, and all these things that we actually don't think about. And when you said the word courage there, it just kind of resonated with me that, like, you could be a really good golfer, but if you don't have the courage to kind of step out of your comfort zone of your actual geographical location, you might actually struggle to, continue to carry on. So I think, having children learn this early on and seeing that these two characters are actually in a country that probably a lot of people haven't even been to, and they're learning their adventures, is really cool. I like that.
Yeah. And I think too, if you think about it, coming back to, for kids, if you're wanting to get them engaged in golf, it's this idea, it is something new, maybe they haven't done. And so getting them to try it in a way where they're just kind of pushing them just kind of to the edge of their comfort zone. And what I see a lot with kids, and as I talk to parents, friends and others, is it's this idea that kids, they might try something, but sometimes we almost set them up to fail, because an example would be taking a young person out to play 9 holes. Even if they played from the front tees, that's probably ridiculously hard for them. It's going to be probably not a very good experience. And so they might have had the courage to go out there with you the first time. They're probably not going to go back unless we set up the environment where they have a chance to have fun. And so, again, maybe it's hitting, from just off the green when they start, and so it's like, oh, well, I had the courage. I went to do that once, and now I'm more likely to go back. Because often when we think about courage, it's like kind of a one and done. Okay, I tried that. We think of something extreme, like for me, that would be jumping out of an airplane, like skydiving, right? So we're not talking about courage in terms of getting kids to do things that are unsafe or that set them up to have a bad experience. But as adults, creating that environment, a safe place for them to learn, right? And so I do lump this into sports psychology for kids, where they can be successful. Mm-hmm. Successful meaning that they can have a good learning experience. They have the opportunity to have fun. They have a lot of opportunity to see how that they're improving. And if we set that new learning environment up for them like that, an environment where it requires courage to try something new or try something they think is hard, right? Because I still have to have the courage to try again if I think it's going to be maybe, it's not something I've done before to that level, right? Maybe I'm going to tee off farther back, or maybe it could even be trying to practice my balance, swinging with my eyes closed or swinging on one leg, right? Because I haven't done that before. And so courage is kind of this perpetual thing that I think is important, and I think is almost always the precursor to starting to develop confidence. Because if you don't try it, whether it's new or it's a higher level or a more difficult version of what you've done, then you can never take the next step and start to build confidence by increasing awareness, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I'm now running the Operation 36 golf programs at our facility. So everybody starts 25 yards away from the hole on the first 9-hole event. And we had a parent junior tournament. And it's kind of a funny story because you talk about courage. It's not actually, listeners, listening, if you're a parent, you haven't played golf, you actually need courage to go out on the golf course as well, right? So I had a situation where one of my new students, he signed up for the parent junior, and the dad arrived and he said, "Oh, I'll just walk with him. My son will he'll just play and I'll just be out there." And I said, "Well, you have to play too. That's part of the parent junior." And I said, he's like, "Oh, I've never played before." And I said, "It's okay." And he's like, "I don't have clubs." And I was like, "I'll let you borrow a few." I was like, "Look, you're going to start close to the hole." He's like, I've never hit a golf ball before." I was like, "Trust me, you're going to figure this out." So he goes out, he has the courage. The dad starts from 25 yards away with his son in the parent junior, comes back after 9. He's like, "All right, you have me sold. I want to start learning golf." But he walked into this with no courage and walked out with a ton of courage. And junior golfers are the same way, right? Like if you mentioned starting at the 4 tees, that's still too far away from most people, or for most junior golfers especially. So getting them closer to the hole gives them a little bit of courage, and then if they have a target, then they can move further away, and that creates a little more courage, right? Like you said. So I like that description you had. But when you were saying this, I was like, oh my God, we just went through this last week, and it wasn't just for the juniors; it's with the parents too.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think I'm a site director for LPGA-USGA girls golf program here in Oklahoma City, and we're in our first session, which has gotten canceled last month because of the rain, but it's going to happen this next weekend. The parents were doing a drive for dough, putt for show. And so they don't know it yet, but we're going to be inviting them, nudging them to participate with the young lady that they bring. So
that's cool. Yep. And they'll have to have some courage as well, won't they?
Absolutely.
So Dr. Beth, you've really shared some really useful information for myself, for the listeners, and that's me being a parent and a golf coach. With your resource, you have Divot and Swish. Where can people find more information about Divot and Swish? And if they want to purchase your book, where could they do that?
They can find more out about Divot and Swish, Travis, on the website, adventureswithdivotandswish.com. And so that's divot like a golf divot and swish, SWISH. They can also follow Divot and Swish on Instagram and Facebook, and that's Adventures with Divot and Swish. And then they can learn more about coaching kids there also on my business website, which I'm sure you'll probably post both of those. I don't want to clutter up, give them a bunch of spelling here, but they can check it out, I'm sure, in the notes for the show that you put out.
Yes, I'll share all those links in the show notes for sure. So where is the next adventure for Divot and Swish? Have you thought about where they're going to head next?
Oh, yes. I thought you might ask that. Yeah. The second book is in the works, and I can't tell you where. Because that would spoil the suspense. But I do promise you that the superpower or the sports psychology skill is going to be something that we might have mentioned today. And it's going to be something that's going to be very, very helpful to young people in their golf performance and also in life. And then also they are going to meet in the first book. They meet Sammy the surfer in Costa Rica. when they learn the superpower of courage. The next book, they are going to meet a young lady who's going to teach them another superpower, like I said, that'll be super helpful to them. So
very
stay
cool.
tuned for that. The goal is for the second adventure to come out over the holidays later this year.
Cool. I'm excited for that, and I like the suspense as well. So, Dr. Beth, thank you so much. Before I let you go, though, I've got one final question for you. And what are your final words of inspiration for raising golfers?
Wow, that's pressure, Travis. Yeah, I think maybe just to encapsulate what we said is this idea to really put on your kid hat and think about or be aware of what is it that makes it fun for my kids. If I really, really want them to keep playing golf, I really want them to get better, if I really want them to love the game for a lifetime, then I need to think about what's fun for them. And if you're not sure, ask them, right? So whatever that experience is, to use your words, create an experience that they're going to enjoy. And there's no right or wrong in that. Like there's not a perfect way to hold it or a perfect way to swing. One of my the people I've been around, he has this quote. You may have heard of him, Rudy Duran. He would always say when he was talking to adults about coaching kids, whether that's parents or coaches out there, he would say, "How do I not know that they're Mozart and I'm trying to teach them chopsticks?" Like, let them be a kid, let them explore, let them play, let them have fun, because how do you not know? They might be Mozart and you're trying to teach them chopsticks. So have fun with them and keep that in mind as you go forward.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Beth. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed the conversation, and maybe we can have you back on the podcast again in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time out of today.
Thanks, Travis, and thanks for what you're doing to inspire families and kids out there yourself to raise golfers for a lifetime.
Thank you. All right, that was a great conversation with Dr. Beth Brown. One thing that I find interesting and common on most podcast episodes is that the idea of fun comes up so often and is preached as something that is so important from guests, whether they're coaches, parents, players, or a person with a doctoral degree. So, I want you to ask yourself a question as a coach or parent of junior golfers. Are you having fun with the juniors that are around you? And are they having fun spending time and being around you? My advice would be put fun in the front of other tactics, and I can imagine there will be more enjoyment, better relationships, and higher chance of longevity for your juniors to stay in the game. I love her idea of a child's book, which she made out of two sports she loves, golf and basketball. Her first book, Divot and Swish, Go on an Adventure in Costa Rica, and what they talk about and learn is the superpower of courage. Now, I love this idea and the way of building an important life skill of having courage. I mean, you would probably agree, golf is not an easy game, nor is life, and they both take a lot of courage. Dr. Beth Brown gave the example of trying not to set children up for failure, and that example was taking them out for 9 holes and have them start so far away from the hole. Now, I see this day in and day out on the golf course, and I'm a big proponent of this, and that's why I'm running the Operation 36 programs at my course, which has everyone start just 25 yards away from the hole, and as their skills progress and develop along the way, with confidence, they slowly move further and further away from the hole. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a lot of fun with Dr. Beth Brown. My final words, go out and create positive experiences for children through golf. Thank you very much, everyone.